So next, I guess for your LinkedIn too. So you said this classical computing is like the canoe in the jungle, and quantum is like a drone.
Yes. So this gets into the deterministic nature of both classical physics and classical computing. So that basically just means like the answer it's going to give out is going to be related to how you programmed it, right? So when you program, the screen from the matrix with all the zeros and the ones, right? When you program the matrix or whatever it is that you're programming, you're going to get out according to what you programmed in, right? So just like a canoe, you got the river is the route. That's what's kind of been encoded into the landscape, and you're gonna follow the canoe. And there's different paths you can take with the canoe, just like there's different logical branches and trees and the zeros and the ones. But ultimately, like, you're gonna go on the canoe where the water is. But with quantum looks at possibility. So the drone view is going to be the aerial view of the whole jungle, river, trees, like all of it, because quantum is operating in a way, that's why it's so good at simulation. It's operating on this realm of possibilities that you could never program yourself. I love how my fun partner puts it. He talks about how, like, if you think about qubits are this really cool thing where you're trying to harness superposition. Superposition in quantum physics and mechanics is when something is 0 and 1 at the same time. So in classical compute, it's 0 or 1, and the zeros or the ones come together and they do the thing. But when something can be 0 and 1 at the same time, what's between 0 and 1? Infinity. So a logical qubit, is kind of like your own little slice of infinity. So if you got so when people talk about like these qubits, it's like they're trying to line up their little slices, their little qubits of infinity. Whereas your bits, right? Your bits and your bytes, even if you have like 2 qubits, you got 2 slices of infinity, but your bits are just what you deterministically programmed your bits to be. So that's what's happening with this crazy stuff. That's why I say we're trying to harness the nature of nature in physics. We're trying to harness the superposition thing to unlock all this discovery, and that's what makes it a drone, because a drone is exploratory. A drone discovers what's in the jungle, whether you were looking for it or not. The canoe's just going to follow the river that you tell it to follow.
So how do you become involved with all this? Like, what got you interested in this from the start?
I've always been into emerging tech. And then I later found out in Strength Finders I have a futurist kind of strength and bent. So I always kind of just kept looking at what was for it. Now, when I first got into emerging tech, I was at Cardinal Health in the enterprise IT, like shared services infrastructure office. And that was my first gig in tech, and I was a project analyst, and it was very rigorous PMO. But I was always interested in the projects, that weren't just like legacy upgrades or modernization. I was always interested in the projects that were using like the new thing. So 10 years ago, that was like big data Hadoop. Of course, like the definition of what's emerging tech changes as things become integrated, or they fall out of favor, or they evolve into something else. But it's been really interesting if you just even look at the slice of the last 10 years of what started off as emerging 10 years ago, that now in some ways is like table stakes. I remember 10 years ago, SAP for analytics, that was a big deal. And now it's like you got Power BI and Fabric, you know what I mean? Like you got Snowflake and you got Tableau, and like 10 years ago, it's just like, wow, look, SAP actually has analytics.
I know. It's crazy how much we've advanced in such when you think about it, such a short amount of time.
Yeah. We've come a really long way from dashboards and IoT sensors.
And playing Pong games.
Yeah, it's or even like broadband, right? Like that's something I brought up in my talk in Chicago, was like, you guys remember how there was no broadband day? People weren't like, oh my gosh, guys, the next big thing is everybody's going to have broadband. Yeah. It was very much like people were still in the mode of like, how is everybody going to have a computer in their house?
Yeah, no, right, yeah.
And Dell and Gateway were like, call us today for premier financing for your very own personal computer.
Yes, you got a TV, you can have a computer.
That's right. They're like, come and get a computer. And then they were just like, there was the whole dial-up thing. And it was like, man, that sound is horrible.
I had forgot all about Gateway. Yeah. What happened with them? This went out of business, I guess?
That's a good question. I don't know what happened with them.
I remember Gateway and Dell, those two big ones back in the day.
Yeah, and I will say this. Some of the kind of older folks who look at quantum computing, I think they're trying to do the history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So I do think that they have this thing in their head when we talk about quantum computers that like we're trying to be like Dell and Gateway and give everybody a quantum computer in their house, and that's like not it. Like, I don't think that's what anybody's like necessarily suggesting, partially because it would be overkill, but also because like it also makes a lot more sense to put QPUs, so to speak, next to GPUs in a data center. And we haven't even gotten into like how we need to completely rethink devices so they're not like burning up. You know.
So next, I was going to ask this two separate questions. I think I'm going to combine them, right? So talk about building a VC fund while also building an ecosystem.
Oh, that's a great question. So the model that we're working with at Barclow and with qubits, it's admittedly like a new one and somewhat novel. And what I mean by that is people know like about like an A16Z, a Y Combinator, an incubator, an accelerator, right? And what we're doing with qubits from like the fund side is like we are going to fund those folks, right? But there's a few different things that we're changing just because what we see the market and the moment needing. One is I saw an article today about like these are the best accelerator programs. Two things about accelerators that we're looking to differentiate and change just for better traction, scale, etc. One, they really center on getting investor money, and not customers.
Yeah, I think that's totally wrong. Yeah, you need to, if I was to run one, I would be focused strictly on customer discovery, getting customers.
Yeah, and so much so like I had a founder once say to me, you know, Sierra, I was so excited. I was and of course she was excited. She was a female founder and she's a woman of color and she got in this accelerator. And she did send the feedback to the program of just like, if I would have spent half the time that I spent in your accelerator trying to pitch investors to give away more of my company, if I would have just spent half of that time going to customers and revenue, I wouldn't have needed the accelerator at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's very telling is that like, you know, it's, if you're telling people how to get more investors, you are showing them how to give up more of their company and not how to go get revenue. And also what investors want, what customers want are different, very different. And another thing too is it's very educational. So I was looking through, you know, we do benchmark, we look at all this stuff, and I remember I was seeing all these modules. They're like bragging about like we got this on pitch and this on finance and this on hiring and this and this. And I remember being like, okay, well, like, does anybody, like, I was looking through some of these stuff. It's like, okay, well, are there any ones that show people how to like run a pilot or run a rapid prototype or to win a bake-off with a competitor if you have a shot at enterprise with procurement? And it was like, oh, here's a class on pilots. Here's a module on prototypes. If you're like, not all accelerators even have that. And I'm kind of like, okay, but that doesn't get them a pilot. That doesn't get them a prototype. That just puts them in a class track in the accelerator incubator about it, right? So there's still kind of this element of theory and practice. So that's one thing that we're going to be changing a bit is like it's going to very much be more customer focused. And the second thing, and I kind of hinted at it just now, was like there's theory and practice to qubits, and to us the way that we're approaching it is like, why would we come up with 36 modules to run all different types of deep tech start, right? Like we mentioned in this conversation, space, quantum simulation, sensing, biotech. Let's say that those four are alpha cohort. Why would we try to put them through the same whatever many classes when we could be kind of like an internal McKinsey to each of them? We can call up the right experts at qubits. We can call people from across the ecosystem, and we can really work with them to develop their pipeline and convert that pipeline into customers, and then use that revenue. And that's what we want to go back to investors with. When they go to do their next round or whatever have you, we come back with like revenue. We come back with LOI, with MOUs, with case studies, not use cases, right? And that's going to have a path to traction way more than just kind of working along these modules and hoping we can pitch more and more investors to move from A to B to C to IPO.
So y'all going to start like an internal incubator accelerator then?
I mean, I almost hesitate to call it that, right? Because when you put that language out there, people do expect that thing I just said, right? It's less.
But you can do something like that though, like a better name, but something like along those lines.
Yeah, like it's more so that the fund that Qubits is raising is looking to have an allocation, and so it's like we identify that cohort, right, and we give them that allocation, but. You can call an incubator an accelerator, but like I think it's going to be a bit more. Well, it definitely will be. I mean, go to market's a contact sport, and so is customers and revenue.
Maybe that is what we could call it. You go to market, whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely more of like a traction engine I would
I
call
like that. I like that word, traction engine.
I think it's
the
more
Barclay traction engine.
Yeah, it's more of a traction engine than it is an accelerator or incubator.
So when you think you're going to start this, it's still all like in the planning phases right now.
Well, so it's part of, so it's all tied to the Fund 2. So qubits is in the process of the Fund 2 raise. And so one of the things we've been doing, feet on the street, is looking to identify potential alpha cohort companies.
Okay.